Welcome to the online meeting for the Phoenix Bus Rapid Transit Program. A lot of information will be shared today, but there are three things that we want you to take away from this presentation. First, we have a commitment to Phoenix residents to deliver Bus Rapid Transit, or BRT. Second, we have 6 strong potential BRT corridors. And finally, the Phoenix BRT program is at the beginning of its public education and outreach process. In 2015, Phoenix voters approved Proposition 104, creating the 35-year street and transit plan known as Transportation 2050, or T2050. A primary objective of T2050 is to provide transportation solutions for the future that consider an additional 600,000 to 700,000 residents in the city of Phoenix. For the city to be economically viable with that kind of growth, a higher percentage of people will need to utilize transit. Fortunately, transit is the most space-efficient way to move lots of people, and BRT was identified as a key component of T2050 to expand our high-capacity transit network, which means Phoenix has a commitment to you to deliver BRT. The question is, how are we going to execute this? One of the first steps is to identify corridors that will form the BRT Foundation Network. BRT has been around for over 45 years, implemented in over 160 cities worldwide, including U.S. cities such as New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, and Houston. BRT is a high-capacity bus service that focuses on improved speed, reliability, convenience, and the overall transit experience. BRT is unique because there are no universal standards. It can be planned and designed to best meet the needs of a specific community. BRT has an opportunity to provide people with faster connections to key destinations, such as job centers, healthcare facilities, schools, and shops. There are common recurring elements found in successful BRT systems, and we'll talk about those next. It's important to note that BRT may have some or all of the elements that will be discussed. But keep in mind, the more elements that are incorporated in a system, the more robust it will be, and the more likely it is to succeed as an effective, efficient transportation service. One element is enhanced stations. This could include center or side stations, wide platforms, level boarding, making it easier for people of all abilities to efficiently access the bus, large canopies or shelters to provide shade, seating and leaning rails, real-time information, letting riders know when the next bus will be arriving, and ticket vending machines. Custom buses would have low floors for level boarding. They would be 60-foot articulated buses with a higher passenger capacity, about 100 to 125 passengers, multiple doors for faster entry and exit, amenities like USB chargers, and space for bikes on board. Advanced fare collection is when a transit rider pays before boarding the bus using mobile fare payment, reloadable smart cards, or ticket validators. Unique branding will differentiate BRT from other transit modes. There are 2 primary components in branding: nomenclature, which is the brand name, and visual, the logo and color scheme. The city will be engaging the public in the process through online polls and contests to get people excited about this new transit option. There is the potential for dedicated lanes. Dedicated lanes separate buses from traffic to increase speed and reliability. They can be implemented for a portion of the corridor or the entire alignment, and can also be time-specific, where a bus can use a dedicated lane during certain hours of the day. The city will evaluate the appropriateness of dedicated lanes based on existing right-of-way. There are areas where dedicated lanes would have minimal impact due to excess right-of-way. Q-jump lanes are a tool to improve transit operations. They consist of an additional lane at an intersection that allows buses to merge smoothly back into the regular through lanes, essentially giving buses a head start. Transit signal priority is also a tool to improve transit operations. It modifies the normal signal operation process to better accommodate buses by holding the green time longer or shortening the red time. Transit signal priority also saves fuel and contributes toward fewer delays. Phoenix City Council and the Citizens Transportation Commission asked the city to reevaluate the initial corridors identified on the Prop 104 ballot and identify other potential corridors for consideration. This is a data-driven process, and using the most recent data, we looked at transit propensity, transit performance, and a ridership forecasting model. This map shows the revised potential BRT corridors based on those factors. These 8 locations that rose to the top include Camelback Road, Indian School Road, Thomas Road, McDowell Road, Van Buren Street, 19th Avenue, 35th Avenue, and 24th Street. Keep in mind that a corridor could be 2 streets coupled together. It's also important to note that since this program is new to the city, we are starting with a clean slate, and our ultimate goal is to identify our foundation network, which will consist of 3 corridors. This network will expand and extend to the outer reaches of the city over time. So even though you don't see potential corridors on this map south of Van Buren or north of Peoria Avenue, as the city grows and there is more demand, the system will build out and the network will grow accordingly. Our focus for the foundation network are on those corridors that will be the most productive and have the highest demand and need.
Now we are going to present more detailed information on transit performance, propensity, and ridership for the existing bus service and potential BRT corridors. Let's start with a general overview of bus service in Phoenix. Phoenix is the dominant transit provider in the region, as 2/3 of all transit boardings in the region are in the city of Phoenix. Phoenix has a grid network for its local bus service that many systems aspire to, but traveling across the grid can be challenging, particularly in a diagonal direction, as this is heavily reliant on rider transfers. The other issue is the current bus network has plateaued in terms of its operating structure in some corridors. For example, many of the core Phoenix routes have 10-minute frequencies or better in the peak. You could add additional frequency, but there would probably be diminishing returns unless it is packaged with some sort of transit infrastructure improvements. Therefore, the current challenge in Phoenix is how do you improve transit speed and reliability to better meet unmet transit demand? So how do potential BRT corridors in Phoenix compare to other successful BRT projects? This chart shows BRT projects from Kansas City, Minneapolis, and Seattle. The green lines on the chart show local bus ridership in the corridor before BRT. The orange lines show the corresponding increase in ridership once BRT was implemented. As you can see, there was a substantial increase in ridership in each of these corridors when BRT was implemented. Now let's compare these BRT projects to some of the higher performing local bus corridors in Phoenix. What you'll see is that many of these local bus corridors in Phoenix already exceed the local bus ridership in some of these successful BRT projects in other cities, which means there is great potential for BRT ridership in Phoenix. Transit ridership in this region is generally reported at the route level, and the transit performance metrics most often used are average daily boardings and boardings per revenue mile. We inventoried all bus routes in the city of Phoenix, and this map shows the routes that have the highest combined average daily ridership and boardings per revenue mile. While ridership in this region is most often reported at the route level, what we're really interested in is ridership by segment along the routes. You can imagine how many bus stops there are in the city of Phoenix, so what we've done here is compile the boardings by bus stop data into 1-mile arterial segments. The segments in green on this map show the segments with the highest local bus ridership in Phoenix. These segments are typically on routes with the highest frequency, and these routes often connect with light rail or other frequent bus service. This map shows transit propensity, which is the demographic and socioeconomic indicators of potential transit performance and demand. This includes things like population density, employment density, low-income households, and more. We have individual maps for each of these categories, but what is shown here is a composite overlay of all these categories together. The darker the color or shading indicates the higher intensity or density of these categories, and these areas have the highest potential for transit demand. Now, if you overlay the ridership by segment map with the composite transit propensity map, you'll see that most of the highest ridership segments overlay with the areas of the highest transit propensity. This is a good thing, as it shows that the current local bus network in Phoenix is serving the areas with the highest potential demand. Using the transit propensity and performance data, we identified 8 BRT corridors shown on the map as a starting point. We then prepared ridership forecasts for each of the corridors. We presented these potential BRT corridors at a technical workshop attended by city staff and departments, Valley Metro, the Maricopa Association of Governments, or MAG, and the Arizona Department of Transportation. We then optimized the BRT corridors based on feedback at the technical workshop so they function more like actual bus routes with logical endpoints such as transit centers. We also combined several of the BRT corridors to improve connections and minimize rider transfers. This resulted in the 6 BRT corridors shown on the map. We will go through each of these corridors individually on the next slide. For each of the following BRT corridors, we show the corridor endpoints, corridor length, and ridership forecast. The first corridor shown is Camelback and 24th Street. This corridor starts at the Desert Sky Transit Center, then travels north on 75th Avenue to Camelback, east on Camelback to 24th Street, then south on 24th Street where it terminates at the future SkyTrain station at 24th Street in Buckeye. This corridor shares a border with the city of Glendale west of 43rd Avenue. The next corridor is Indian School and 24th Street. This corridor also starts at the Desert Sky Transit Center, then travels north on 75th Avenue to Indian School, east on Indian School to 24th Street, then south on 24th Street, where it terminates at the future SkyTrain station at 24th Street in Buckeye. This corridor is Thomas and 44th Street. It also starts at the Desert Sky Transit Center, then travels east on Thomas to 44th Street, then south on 44th Street, and terminates at the SkyTrain station at 44th Street in Washington. Our next corridor is McDowell and 44th Street. This corridor is much shorter than the other corridors because it starts at 35th Avenue instead of the Desert Sky Transit Center. It does so because this is the location that it would overlap with the future Capital I-10 West Light Rail extension. This corridor travels east on McDowell to 44th Street, then south on 44th Street to its termination, the SkyTrain station at 44th Street, Washington. This corridor is 35th Avenue and Van Buren. This corridor starts at the Metro Center Transit Center, then travels south on 35th Avenue to Van Buren, and east on Van Buren to downtown Phoenix. This corridor includes a sub-option, shown in dashed lines, which uses 19th Avenue instead of 35th Avenue south of Camelback. Our final corridor is 19th Avenue in Van Buren. This corridor starts at the Sunny Slope Transit Center, then travels south on 19th Avenue to Van Buren, and east on Van Buren to downtown Phoenix. The segment that is north of Montebello overlaps with light rail on 19th Avenue, and therefore is shown as a sub-option. The ultimate goal is to select BRT corridors that form our BRT Foundation network. So what makes a good BRT network scenario? In general, there are 3 best practices we should follow. First, we want good geographic coverage and spacing. For example, a minimum 2 miles between corridors. Second, we want BRT corridors to intersect with other BRT corridors and connect with light rail and frequent bus service. And third, we want logical endpoints that are also origins and key destinations. So what are some potential BRT network scenarios? We have developed 4 potential scenarios using the best practices described on the previous slide. The first BRT network scenario is Camelback 24th Street, Thomas 44th Street, and 35th Avenue Van Buren. The second scenario is Camelback 24th Street, Thomas 44th Street, and 19th Avenue Van Buren. The third scenario is Indian School 24th Street, McDowell 44th Street, and 35th Avenue Van Buren. And the fourth scenario is Indian School 24th Street, McDowell 44th Street, and 19th Avenue Van Buren. This slide shows a comparison of all 4 BRT network scenarios side by side. you can see that they each have slightly different geographic coverage and transit connections. We showed these BRT network scenarios to provide further context for each of the 6 BRT corridors.
We have a fantastic opportunity in front of us. We are working to bring a BRT network to the 5th largest city in the U.S. The BRT program has begun public education and outreach on the 6 potential corridors. Once completed, we will go back to the Citizens Transportation Commission and City Council with a staff recommendation for the BRT Foundation Network. Phoenix BRT will be developed based on where the current and future transit ridership shows the most need and with lots of community input. Ultimately, the Phoenix BRT program needs community input to solidify our 3 corridors for the BRT Foundation Network. To provide input on the BRT Foundation Network, please take our online survey on our webpage at phoenix.gov/BRT. Thank you for participating in our online presentation.